Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hey everybody, it's David, Mike, and Greg. We're back with the Near Memo, episode 160, which I thought was last week, but it's in fact this week, and we will be talking about Google Business Profile messaging and the appearance of WhatsApp. We'll be talking about a survey that was done by Scorpion and a talk given at Moz by Tom Capper about search quality and SEO and some of the challenges there. And then David will be talking about the leak again, the local aspect of the leak, and kind of riffing on his excellent article that we published that you should definitely check out. If you're a local SEO, you really need to take a look at David's article about the leak and its implications. So, Mike Blumenthal.
So, I don't know, a week, 10 days ago, Google announced that Google Business Profile Chat, which is available to small businesses, and their business messaging API, which is the interface between chat and other third-party services, are both being discontinued as of July 31st. Part of the GBP chat had become filled with spam. It was Google had, initially put a lot of effort into it. I think it got started in 2017, but it also, they had a tremendous opportunity to position Google Business as a center of, business communications, which of course they didn't do. But also this week, it appears that they are slow rolling out, which is their 1%, 10%, 20, 50%. They're slow rolling out the ability to add WhatsApp and SMS messaging to your profile, apparently as a replacement for this chat. It's fascinating on multiple levels because at the highest level, it shows one, we've talked about this, but how Google's lack of direction and vision from the top creates and bottom-up engineering incentives creates these problems in product development. For example, they had, 10 messaging apps between 2008 and now 15. I don't know. Allo, Duo. There were just a ton of them, and I can't even.
It's a total mess. It extends to their whole messaging strategy, even on the consumer side.
Right, and it just reinforces the point we were making last week about how their internal incentives and their lack of corporate sort of structure from top down prevent really dominating markets these days because they can't quite get their act together. They also do this thing where, build it and people will come, and if they don't, fuck them, and they discontinue stuff, which is another new motto I think that we ought to assign to Google. And this is one of those fuck 'em situations.
Yeah, we're gonna bleep this in the.
No, we're not. I'm told it's like this is Google, and where this became so clear to me was in talking to several small and large companies that had built the integration to messaging. I spoke with a large listing provider, and they said, "Oh, nobody's going to miss it. It's not that heavily used." For them, it was just a minor annoyance. But for small messaging providers like Switchbird, John Hall, and Leadferno, Aaron Wyke, they had to put massive amount of their limited resources into building an integration. The API was very, very buggy. The support was very sketchy. The authorization processes were very complicated. Initially, there was a great team behind it. So when they finally went from letting Podium use this to letting the Sochis of the world use it to then rolling the API out to the smaller fellows. There was a really good team behind it. But then in 2023, 2022, you started seeing a lot of spam. And then 2023, that whole team got axed, gone, right? So I guess the writing has been on the wall. But for these smaller players, I guess that for them, they have to live by the adage, when you sleep with elephants, you got to be careful when it turns over, right? They invested a lot of money in building out this product, both for market demand and to create demand for their products. And both of them, are like, what? We had to reallocate resources. And so it just points to me how Google, in their positioning of this, of all their products and their APIs really is not a trustworthy partner. It really affects the small players in the ecosystem. And it's really problematic when they do this sort of, build it and they will come, and if they don't, fuck them things, right? It just really is problematic across the board for me. So anyways, that's the messaging story. Hopefully by next week or week after, you'll be able to hook up WhatsApp to your GBP, which in some sense is acknowledgement and SMS in the United States, WhatsApp every place else, acknowledgement of the reality of messaging in our world. And when you do that, just take a look at Google and think, man, they could have dominated messaging if they had gotten their act together 7 or 8 years ago and managed to totally screw the pooch, as it were.
Well, I mean, in fairness to the Google culture, which is not something that I'm inclined to do all the time, I think that there's, if it were a totally top-down organization, that would be kind of tyrannical, right? So there's some mix of the two that's ideal, some democratic impulse from the bottom, because often those people are closer to the customer and they have good ideas, and the C-suite is not. But there's a certain kind of incoherence about the way that Google goes about things.
Right. I mean, when you have 3 or 4 competing products and then there's nobody to decide which one to bet on, that's a problem. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Yeah, at some point you have to empower a product visionary, and I'm sure that there actually are plenty of product visionaries inside of Google, but they're, for whatever reason, their corporate structure doesn't end up promoting them to a position where they can say tyrannically, as a benevolent dictator, this is our company messaging strategy, right? I think just contrast it with Apple, which is now getting, pressured from the outside to change the color of their messages and everything else, because it's been like one of their most popular products, and it's been very consistent, and it's been a winning feature for them since the dawn of the iPhone, right? And so that's that's a company. It's not like Apple's not able to innovate. It's just that they do things a very different way. And of course, Steve Jobs was like,
he was a dictator.
One in a trillion. Well, I was going to say he's a 1 in a trillion product visionary, and he was a dictator. But I think when you get to the scale of company that Apple is, and you get to the number of people that decisions impact, benevolent dictators may actually be a better corporate structure to proceed with. So,
well, certainly in Apple's case, it worked for Apple like 80% of the time. I mean, they had some misfires, but for the most part, it was really a successful approach. And it may be that Jobs was kind of a unique figure in terms of his vision and his attention to detail. Tim Cook is a very, very, very strong leader, and Apple has grown in value during his tenure, but he's not got the product vision that
no, but he's empowered people who do.
Yeah,
that's my point, and I don't think that
he
happens inside of Google at all.
Yeah, he's been an excellent CEO, but they may, it's the product vision may not be quite as strong as when Jobs was around, but
that's fair. But again, I would take issue with, AirPods, which I'm now wearing, which you're now wearing, which Mike is now wearing. I mean, that to me is a pretty significant, product evolution, and Mike's pointing out the watch. And I just think that there is still clearly innovation happening within Apple. And I think that the people, whoever's in charge of the AirPods product or the Apple Watch product, like they clearly have, if not carte blanche, like a massive runway to do whatever they want, and people need to fall in line. And it's just a very different mindset from what we've seen in Google with messaging inside of GBP, with GBP more broadly. I think and plenty of other examples where it's just not Google's structure. And that works well when you're sort of incubating products that might work, but it doesn't work well once you reach the scale that, again, Google is reaching with all of its business products.
Well, another interesting contrast between Apple and Google is that Apple seems to have much longer tenured employees in some of these roles.
In right? The same domain, exactly. Whereas Google, we know that you don't move up in Google unless you've sampled a bunch of different pies, which I think leads to a major brain drain in domain expertise. So,
yeah.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.